Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Tuesday, May 26th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. As we look forward to the FIFA World Cup coming to North America and Kansas City in June, it's a good time to consider how we got a seat at the soccer table. Kansas City has evolved into something of an American soccer capital. Well, how did that happen? There's no one better to explain this than Nate Bukaty. You know Nate from his years as co-host of WHB 810's morning show, but he left that role and has become one of the nation's premier media voices for soccer in America. He's worked broadcasts for Apple TV, Fox Sports, and has appeared on the Galazzo Network on CBS Sports. And now he's an author. Bukaty has teamed up with journalist Rustin Dodd, formerly a Star sports writer and now a senior writer for The Athletic, to tell the story of Kansas City's place in the soccer world. The book is called Perfect Pitch: How Kansas City Became the Heart of American Soccer and Landed the World Cup. Hey, there are reasons why Kansas City was selected by FIFA over larger and more prominent cities to host games. We're going to break it down during our conversation. And toward the end of our chat, Nate will tell you how to get a copy of the book and where he and Rustin are appearing later this week. And when we're finished, I'll share what's on my radar on the Kansas City sports scene this week. Hello, Nate.
Hey, Blair. How are you, man? It's great to talk to you.
It is great talking to you, my friend. And what's really a privilege is I'm talking to an author now. That's how cool is that?
You know what? I specifically remember the conversation I had with you as I was trying to figure out how to get this whole process underway and how to find a publisher and all those things. And I've read your work in the past, not just in the Star, but some of your books. And so it's kind of crazy to think about how green I was at that time with the process and how far we've come. And now we've got the book. So pretty crazy stuff. Yeah, I honestly, Blair, I never really thought I would say that, like author, but here it is. And I've enjoyed the process so much, I think I would like to do it again. But I have to say, if I hadn't had the help also of Rustin Dodd, this wouldn't have happened because he really is an author.
Rustin, our friend, former Kansas City Star sports writer, now with The Athletic, a senior writer with The Athletic, and an uber-talented writer, Rustin Dodd. Of course, as we mentioned in the open, the name of the book is Perfect Pitch: How Kansas City Became the Heart of American Soccer and Landed the World Cup. It's quite a title. Listen, what Kansas City is about to experience deserves a book, and you're the one to do it. I'm glad you did it. I thought what we do, I've gone through it. I really enjoyed reading it, a dozen chapters. It really takes us through the history of soccer in Kansas City. And I thought what we do is hit on a handful of pivot points and identify some of the important people that helped create the, what we're about to experience with the World Cup coming to Kansas City in less than a month. And you touched on all of them during this book. Let's start with the influence of Lamar Hunt. None of this happens without Lamar Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs, the founder of the Chiefs in the AFL, but a big soccer presence for Kansas City as well.
For the United States, I think you could make a very strong case. In fact, I would, if you had asked me to pick and defend the most important person when it comes to soccer's presence in the United States, I would say it's Lamar Hunt. I do want to quibble one thing with you, Blair, when you said I touched on them all. I wish I did. But honestly, that's one of the biggest fears I have about the book is that all the people in Kansas City who played a role or know about the role of soccer in Kansas City, there's no way I covered everyone. I came away, we were in a crunch, and I'm sorry, I don't want to go on a tangent, but we were in a time crunch, to get the book written to make sure it was out before the World Cup. I think I did 70 plus interviews. I walked out of every one of those interviews thinking there's 5 more people I need to talk to, and there just wasn't enough time to get to them all. So, but yeah, Lamar Hunt, you can't tell. There's certain people you just absolutely cannot tell the story without. And Lamar Hunt, I think, is number one. And one of the things I would tell you, Blair, you've spent some time around Clark Hunt. I got to interview him for an hour. And honestly, I don't know how this sounds to say, but I was not particularly optimistic about getting much from that interview, because usually when we see Clark Hunt talk, it's very he's very by the book. He's very straightforward and prepared, and kind of sticks to the script. There's not a lot of I don't know, like personal flair or anything like that to his conversations. I walked out of that conversation thinking, man, there is a guy who is proud of his dad. I mean, if any one of my kids is as proud of me when I'm gone as that guy is of his dad, I think my life will have been a success. And that really hit me. But yes, the story of Lamar Hunt is a phenomenal one. And it's one about him really, and I love this about the book too, Blair, is I really explore the city, how I feel about the city, what makes Kansas City what it is, and kind of using soccer as a vehicle to tell that story. Lamar Hunt's the perfect guy because in 1963, he really had almost zero knowledge or relationship with Kansas City and zero knowledge or relationship with soccer. And by the end of 1963, he was in love with both. And they would be a huge part of the rest of his life. And he would make things happen here that honestly have never happened anywhere else in the world because of those two things. So that's a pretty cool thing. And the story about how he fell in love with soccer at the same time he was falling in love with Norma is a really cool story too.
Well, let me say before we go on is that I know you are a bona fide author now because you have fears of things that you omitted in the book, and everybody who has written a book shares that feeling with you. So the course name of the book is Perfect Pitch. And let's fast forward to a little bit. Listen, Lamar Hunt founded founded the Kansas City Wizards. He was in on MLS soccer, of course, and so the Wizards are Kansas City's first pro soccer team. Not first, but first Major League Soccer team.
There was a brief 2-year stint of the Kansas City Spurs, I believe, and I should know that
late 60s, right?
Yeah, but what I would say about Lamar, the biggest thing people need to understand is when he came back from Ireland after his trip with Norma in love with soccer, he was a part of the NASL, and that folded. Then he didn't give up. He started MLS, and as Clark told me, he was in the room when this happened. That league was going to fold. The owners had all voted to abandon the league in, I think, 2004, and so you got to remember that guy who's already been a part of one league that's folded, another league that's in the process of folding, and his answer was not to give up, but was to buy 2 more teams in the league. So he owned Columbus and Dallas on top of Kansas City, and Phil Anschutz, another Kansan, bought 6 of the teams. So 90% of the 10-team league was owned by 2 guys. And now you look at a league that's got 30 teams in it, an evaluation for the team here in town of $700 million, and Lionel Messi playing in league and all that. It doesn't happen if Lamar Hunt is not so completely determined that soccer will work here that he fails and then tries and fails and tries again. And that's why I say he's the most important figure.
Let's jump ahead. Now the Wizards, they win an MLS Cup. They play for another title, but to me, the biggest game that team played when they were identified as the Kansas City Wizards happened in 2010 at Arrowhead Stadium against Manchester United. And to me, and you may disagree with me on this, the idea of Kansas City becoming a soccer capital or building toward that actually started with that game that night. 52,000 people at Arrowhead Stadium watching the Kansas City Wizards defeat Manchester United. I don't know how motivated United was that night, but the Wizards won the game. How important was that game to the Kansas City soccer landscape?
Crucial, absolutely crucial. And I was one of those annoying people that was wearing a Celtic jersey in the crowd that night. There were, a lot of wannabe soccer fans like me who were wearing their own favorite team's jersey because they really were not taking the Wizards that seriously at that time. I'm not proud to say that, but that's kind of where I fell at the time. I liked the Wizards, but I didn't take them that seriously. And then, of course, most of the crowd was Manchester United fans. But as Rob Thompson told me, and I put this in the book, it was like, was it Rocky IV when he fights against Ivan Drago? And after a while, the Russian fans start cheering for Rocky. Everybody was cheering for the Wizards at the end. And there's a great story that we did not put in the book, but I think there's a symmetry to this. When Sir Alex Ferguson, who most people think I think is the greatest coach in the history of the world sport, brought Manchester United here, they trained where the Wizards trained at that time, which was Swope Soccer Village, which is now all these years later, 16 years later, where the UK, the England national team is going to be training and calling home for the entirety of a World Cup that they very much believe they can win. And typical summer in Kansas City, a massive, hard thunderstorm popped up and ruined their whole training session. And Alex Ferguson, instead of doing the training, a bunch of fans had come to watch, set all the players up on tables inside the training facility and let all the fans come in and signed autographs for him, which I think was a really cool background story. But the reason what you're saying is true is because that was right before the rebrand. It kind of launched the rebrand, and it was like, it's almost like I feel like in a Christian service when it's Easter or Christmas and all of a sudden you've got 10 times the congregation you normally do. If I were a preacher, I would think to myself, okay, this is my shot. This is my chance to convince all these people they got to keep coming back every week, not just and I don't think you do it by finger wagging. I think you do it by saying hey, look at what you get out of this. And I think that's what happened with the Wizards. They launched the season ticket campaign, the stadium, the rebrand all came off the back of that momentum. And I think that was really the kind of the what do you call it, the flashpoint.
All right. Well, then I'm going to bundle some topics here, and you'll see why I'm doing it. But Neil Patterson and Cliff Illig, Peter Vermees, Matt Beasler, Graham Zusi, all these, speaking of the rebrand, now it becomes Sporting Kansas City, and all between owners, managers, players, the I don't know, the identity of soccer in Kansas City changes immensely. It has become the cool thing. The stadium was cool. The players were cool. The uniform was cool. The colors. I mean, all of a sudden, this was, you had to be over at what's now Sporting Park, but you had to be there. And the games were selling out, and soccer just went to another level with Sporting Kansas City, didn't it?
Boy, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I don't even know if we used that term in the book that you did, but cool. It was all of a sudden cool. Soccer went from being the kind of nerdy Dungeons and Dragons-y thing, with the Wizards and all that, to the cool kids are doing it, and people wanted to be there. And I'm glad that you kind of touched on it because, I had a history teacher back in the day would tell me that history is told through the lens a lot of times of the most powerful people in the room, the richest people, the political leaders. But if you really want to understand history, you got to understand it from the common man's perspective. What were they living through at that time? And I think this story is kind of the same because you can't tell the story without the uber wealthy, the Lamar Hunts and the Illigs and Pattersons, because if they don't invest in it and they don't love Kansas City the way that the rest of us do, none of this happens. At the same time, all the way to the coaches, Peter Vermees and his entire staff, and those players you just talked about, to the guys that designed the uniforms that were so cool and did the branding, to the fans who were a part of that Save the Wizards movement. And most of them ended up becoming full-time employees of Sporting Kansas City. It was like they thought, Sam Perrin, one of those people, told me he thought it was a folly. He didn't think they had any chance when they started to Save the Wizards. Not only did they save the Wizards, they then got to redesign the club in their own, like what they had in mind, what they thought it could be. And this is what they came up with. And it was, and the other context to that, Blair, is you got to remember that was back before the Royals World Series runs and the Patrick Mahomes runs. Nobody was winning in town. And the owners of the other teams, as great as they were not in town. So when they're not winning and they're not in town, there seemed just kind of like a malaise and a lack of ambition in the city. In a city that ties so much of its self-esteem to sports and success in sports. And all of a sudden, you got an owner that's calling in to talk radio, to have it out with the host about the way the team's playing, that they're doing brash things. They look like they care. They're invested in the community. And I think that the city really was yearning for something like that, specifically at that time.
And while that was happening, uh, some major downtown construction and an overhaul basically was happening. One of the things that came from this was the Power and Light District. And so basically on a parallel track, while Sporting was succeeding and winning the 2013 MLS Cup, as you said, um, the U.S. national team is involved in events that are drawing crowds to the Power and Light District. And all of a sudden, Kansas City is being broadcast on these international soccer events, World Cup games. Let's see, let's go around the U.S. and see the reaction. And they always came to Kansas City. How did that begin? What was the origin of that? I think that is so important to the identity of Kansas City as a soccer capital.
And there's butterfly effects all the way to the reason that the Kansas City Current exists is because of one of those watch parties. The first ones were in 2010. And Rob Thompson, the wonderful PR guy, marketing guy for not marketing, communications guy for Sporting Kansas City, kind of helped get those things organized early on. He wasn't the only one. But then in 2010, so many people showed up for it that everybody in the Power and Light District at the first one, they just thought, we'll just put out a trash can. We'll put the game on if you guys want. And one thing that's crazy, Blair, if you remember that, even back in 2014, the video board, and there was not an HD video board, but still thousands of people got together to watch those games. And it's really hard to say like what was the origin of it, because it was one of those Kansas City things that just kind of grew organically through civic pride. But I think that's one of the things I really learned when I researched for the book is this recurring theme in this town of us trying to come together to do something to legitimize the city to the rest of the world. And the World War I Museum is a perfect example. The Truman Sports Complex is a perfect example. And then the Power and Light District was one of those things that was happening, as you said, at the same time. And it was almost just like a perfect alignment of the stars. You have this venue that's perfect for social media footage. It looks great when it's full. It looks like a festive atmosphere. It looks packed, and nobody else in the country was really doing that. So it really started to pick up a lot of momentum. And it also took the fact that you had two homegrown guys and Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi playing in that 2014 World Cup. Everybody loved them in town. Everybody wanted to support them. And I will tell you, Blair, one of the best parts of the entire process for me of working on this book, I sat down with Graham at lunch for 2 hours and we talked about all these things. And he scored, he had the assist on the game-winning goal against Ghana. And he started telling me about how when he went back into the locker room in Brazil, that was right when Twitter was really starting to become a big thing. He gets on social media and all the footage he's seeing is of the Power and Light District. And then he also saw a video of a fan in the stands right where he had taken the corner kick who's going crazy. And over his shoulder is Graham's mom, dad, and siblings hugging each other and jumping up and down. And as he tells me this, he is bawling. I mean, like he had to stop. He was crying. And, I'm thinking to myself, this is an incredible moment to list, what it means to him, 12 years later to think about those memories and the association he has with Kansas City because of it.
Nate Bukaty is our guest, and Pitch Perfect is the book. And all these stories that we're discussing are expanded on in detail in the book. Let's start to wind it down by bringing it to the present. Season 4 of Ted Lasso is going to drop in August, and how, talk about a harmonic convergence of events, to have Ted Lasso star in this, incredible series. They're going to bring it back for a 4th season. England is staying here. People know the Ted Lasso story, of course, Jason Sudeikis. I had drinks last week with a couple of writers who were here from London, and they didn't know that Ted Lasso was from Kansas City. And not only that, I told them that they went to high school a couple of miles from where, England's going to train. I mean, that's how close Jason Sudeikis is to this. But you devote an entire chapter to the Ted Lasso effect here, and he really does embody what Kansas City's about and what it hopes to be as a host city for the World Cup.
Yeah, I think Jason Sudeikis kind of used that character to tell the world what Kansas City's all about. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. There's a couple of interesting things about that. So when I started working on the network level in soccer, you don't run across a lot of people that do what I do that are from the Midwest. A lot more from Kansas City than other places, but you just don't. Most people are from the coasts or another country altogether, usually. And so when they would ask me where I'm from, I would say Kansas City. And usually it's just kind of met with a blank stare. Like there's no follow-up question because they don't know anything about Kansas City, So, that's about it. So I started saying Kansas City, the home of Ted Lasso. And they would go, "Oh, really?" And it always struck me that, wow, it's not as obvious to everybody else watching the show that he's from Kansas City because all of his references are mostly Easter eggs. They don't really, he doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's little subtle things here. Oh, that's Arthur Bryant's on his wallpaper, Yeah. And one thing I thought was really fun, Blair, and I won't, go to the whole details of it, but there's an episode we really feature in the book that takes place in Amsterdam involving Arthur Bryant's barbecue sauce, a trip on mushrooms, Tex Winter's triangle offense, and jazz music and Dutch total football. And when the Dutch come here, I want to try to thread that entire story together for them because in the book, we basically said only a guy from Kansas City could connect all of those things. And it's because Kansas is the cradle of basketball coaching, right? The way the game evolved as a sport came from the minds of Fogg Allen and Tex Winter and all these guys, much like the game of soccer evolved in the Netherlands. It wasn't invented there, but the thought of how the game should be played evolved there. When James Naismith invented basketball, there are similar rules in his original rules to basketball, like the yellow card, red card system. 2 fouls, you're out of the basketball game. You can't be replaced. And then the tie-in with jazz music, I could give you a whole rant on that sometime, Blair, over a beer if you're interested. But basketball and soccer are jazz music in sport form. Extemporaneous, improvisational self-expression within a group context, as opposed to football, which is much more rigid, like, symphony orchestra type. And they tie all that together. And where did jazz music grow up? In Kansas City. Wasn't invented here, but it grew up here. And for Ted Lasso to tie all of that together and then compare it to the way that soccer evolved in the Netherlands, to me, is like only a guy from Kansas City could do that, right? And I think that's really fun. And I hope the Dutch kind of get a kick out of that when they come here.
All right. So what are you expecting in a couple of weeks when Argentina and the Dutch and the Brits and Algeria over in Lawrence and they all come and their fans come and there've been some mixed news about this. Ticket prices are high. Airfare is a little high. Maybe not as many international visitors. I don't know. We'll see. We've never experienced anything like this. It's I read it in your book and I agree. It's the single greatest sporting event in the world. It's the single greatest sporting event that'll ever come to Kansas. Although I shouldn't say that. Super Bowl may come here in a few years. We'll see. But this is bigger than that because it's more global. So what are you expecting to see in a couple weeks?
The short answer is I don't know either, Blair, because I've never even been to a World Cup. The first time I ever attend a World Cup is going to be in my hometown, which is a wild thing to think and say. And the World Cup's never come to Kansas City, so even people I talk to who have been to other World Cups don't know exactly how it's going to play out here. I know what you're talking about with all the early numbers about hotels and airfare, and I can't claim to know how to process all those things. Here's what I do know about my experience of having watched the World Cup religiously since 1998. There's usually a life cycle of negativity that leads up to the games because there's a lot of things to be negative about. FIFA's got its issues with corruption. Our own government has geopolitical turmoil right now that some people find problematic. I don't want to get into it, but that's a reality that's in front of this. The last World Cup in Qatar, there were all kinds of stories being written about human rights atrocities that were taking place in building those stadiums. Same thing happened in Brazil. There were all kinds of geopolitical issues in Russia. And I'm not dismissing any of those things. Those are all very serious, real topics. It's like all of the ugliness in the world is piled in front of us right beforehand. Then they kick off the first game, and the beauty of soccer comes to the forefront, the part that unites all of us globally, that brings people together despite their differences. This celebration of a game, a kid's game that anybody could play, unites the world, and everybody gets behind it, and they forget about all the problems for a while. And I'm not saying those problems go away. I'm not saying that that those things don't deserve coverage, but that is what's happened every World Cup I've watched. So I think what's going to happen is the world's going to get swept away with the biggest World Cup that's ever happened, and Kansas City is going to be at the heart of it. And I hope as many people come here as possibly can, and I hope as many people here love it as much as they can. And what I really hope to accomplish with the book is to enhance that joy. For people from Kansas City, I want you to walk around with that typical KC heart on your chest and say, let me tell you about this place. Let me tell you about Lamar Hunt. Let me tell you about Matt Beasler. Let me tell you about the fact that the supporter shield was invented here, that the entire sports architecture industry started here. Let me tell you about what we are all about. And if you do that, I think everybody that comes here is going to be like, holy cow. I had no expectations of this one town. The one town I had no expectations of was the town that was by far the most impressive and fascinating. And that's what I expect to happen. And I want to help motivate people to have that attitude, because that's what we'll do, Blair. And I'm sorry for the rant, but that's what makes us special as Kansas Cityans, right? It's not the famous monuments. I mean, we have a great World War I museum, but that's not what makes Kansas City special. It's why we built it that makes us special. It's the fact that we care so darn much about this place, and we're proud to be from here, yet humble and authentic at the same time. And if they experience that type of humanity here, it's not going to compare. It's going to blow every other side out of the water. That's what I think.
Perfect Pitch: How Kansas City Became the Heart of American Soccer and Landed the World Cup, by Nate Bukaty with Rustin Dodd. Usual suspects here: Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. How do you get the book?
Yeah, those are all fine, but I would always encourage people to support your local bookstore. So Rainy Day Books is a great one. There any local bookstores that carry it would be great, but we are partnering with Rainy Day Books for a book signing event on May 28th. I'm not sure when this pod airs, so hopefully that's before that. That's on Thursday, May 28th. And if you go to the Rainy Day Books website or Eventbrite and search out Perfect Pitch, you can buy tickets. It's going to be at Unity Temple. I remember going to watch Bob Costas do a book signing with Joe Poznansky when I was right out of college at Unity Temple. And I'm not comparing myself to Bob Costas, but to think that I'm going to get to sit in that same stage with Rustin and do a book signing is kind of a pinch yourself moment. So I hope to have a really good crowd there. And we're going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk for an hour about the book. We're going to answer questions and all that. So I'd love to see people there.
Fantastic. Great conversation, Nate Bukaty. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for being on.
Blair, I want to thank you for being one of those people that has put Kansas City on a pedestal for years and years and years. And as a person from here, I appreciate all that. And I appreciate you letting me have some time to promote the book. Thank you.
Here's what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. There will be a first in Lawrence. On Friday, the University of Kansas will host an NCAA baseball tournament regional for the first time. The Jayhawks won the Big 12 regular season and tournament and will open postseason play against Northeastern. The 4-team double elimination event includes Arkansas and Missouri State. The team that emerges from this event will play a super regional the following week, and that winner will advance to the College World Series in Omaha. The Chiefs have started the third phase of their off-season training activities and will hold 6 practices through June 3rd. There's one more phase, the mandatory minicamp, after that, and then the team will break for the summer. All eyes will be on Patrick Mahomes, who's recovering from knee surgery and running ahead of schedule, but I think you'll see Justin Fields taking the snaps here. We'll also see Kenneth Walker for the first time in a Chiefs uniform. The Super Bowl MVP running back for the Seattle Seahawks was the team's biggest offseason acquisition. What you won't see this week is wide receiver Rashee Rice, who's serving a 30-day jail sentence for violating terms of his probation. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff of Gabriella Lacey and Suzanne Hogan, along with our editors Hannah Wise, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Thank you for listening, and please let us know what's on your mind by leaving us a review. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.